Novex Dance presents.
I think the most important thing to say in relation to a choreographer's handbook is that I was very lucky to be part of the beginning of the School of Andrés de Keersmacher in Brussels, which is called Parts, um, which I think began not quite 20 years ago, maybe it is 20 years ago. Um, and has always had an almost entirely visiting faculty of very extraordinary artists from all over the world. And Anne-Theresa de Keersmacher and her then co-director um, uh, uh, dis- uh, uh, decided to offer and encourage a situation where how you teach a, a how you teach creative practice within dance making could be um, questioned and challenged and taken forwards, and most importantly, prioritized to be to be equal with the dance with the physical dance training. And at that time, this was almost unique. There was
Could
nowhere
you
else.
talk a little bit more about, yeah, how this was unique and kind of what was it like before,
Well,
in terms of, yeah, the choreographic process?
most institutions, most dance institutions offered a physical training. There were often choreographic courses, but they were always perceived as secondary to the physical training. Um, something happened at parts between um, a whole group of people that were visiting teachers, and also several generations of quite extraordinary students, many of whom are highly recognized dance artists in their own right now. Um, and a lot of what I wrote in the choreographer's handbook was a reflection of this scene. So the music producer Brian Eno has this beautiful concept that it's never about genius, it's about senius. So that nothing happens without this without this flow of information and encouragement and space given. Um, so and also because the book reflects this moment, I think it would be very, I think it'd be very difficult to write it now. I think you wouldn't write it now because that moment has engendered such a proliferation of fruitful possibilities that it would be harder to capture. Um, and the other element of the book was that at that time, and it began at parts in Brussels, I had this I had decided um, not to encourage any physical work at all within workshops, but only discursive sharing. That sounds awful now. I mean, I wouldn't do it now, but do you know what? It happened by accident in a workshop where it was in Berlin, and something happened whereby we couldn't be in the space we were supposed to be in, and we ended up in a kitchen, and we started sharing, and there was this tremendous excitement, clear for me and everybody else in the room, to hear what other people to hear other people's struggles, fears, um, um, fantasies, imaginations towards what can happen. And I went on doing that. But in order to ground it, um, I took the habit for 5 years of writing what everybody anything anybody said that was interesting. So I had these notebooks full of stuff, and I pulled on them a lot when I wrote the book. So I don't mean any of this in a way of fake humility. This was the truth of the book. I think it's very important to understand that. And I suppose the only other thing was that I decided it should be framed mainly as a series of questions, rather than, this is the way to do it. And that just reflected the fact that I had already experienced very strongly that there. Oh, okay. So I began life as a ballet dancer, and I had a real career as a ballet dancer. I danced for 13 years with the Royal Ballet. I mean, um, and by the end of that, I was a soloist. It feels like another lifetime, and only occasionally I recall it um, and think, well, what does that mean in relation to what I do now? Um, but I was simultaneously, by complete accident of fate, I was performing for the most important experimental choreographer in England at that time, a woman called Rosemary Butcher. And I performed with her for 13 years, the same number of years I was a ballet dancer, but they overlapped. And so it was odd. I lived this dual existence within this highly formalistic, hierarchical, spectacular bourgeois world, and also then in kind of what you would call downtown spaces and so forth. And it was difficult to negotiate the passage between the two. So it has made me all my life very, but I found interesting people in both places. And so it's made me want to do the work all my life to refuse the binaries which split this and that, which say if you do this, you can't do that. Because that just limits, right? The way all binaries limit. I thought this would be advice to myself. I can't give anybody else advice, and everybody seems very good at finding what they need on the whole. But I would say do something every day. If you're making, if you're in process, like finding a way to keep a practice alive, even in your house. Do something every day. Um, to When you're making something, to keep going for a bit before judging it. Um, I mean, I don't do that. I watch things straight away and start weeping with shame. But no, I don't always. Sometimes I get excited to think it's good. But I think this came from Kevin Volans that I studied composition with, and he would say work for a week before you even look at it or listen to it. And I think the third thing is stay interested in everybody else, because oh, the the larger world we put our work out into all the time wants to divide us and say, she's really good, I didn't like this was great. There's so many interesting things. Stay interested in everybody else. That's it.
Thanks for taking your time to tune into Dance Behind the Screen, a bi-monthly interview series where we go behind the screen to question process, product, and social media. Be sure to follow us on social media at KNOW Box Dance. See you next time, and don't forget to say no to the box.